This is ILTV on the hour, bringing you the biggest stories from Israel and the Middle East. I'm Lidar Gavelazi, and it's nearly 4:30 p.m. Israel time and 9:30 a.m. in New York, and today is day 674 of the war in Gaza. At this hour, we await a special press conference by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Prime Minister announced he will hold two press conferences today, one beginning in just a few moments for the foreign press, and one at 8 p.m. tonight for the Israeli public. This comes at a critical time as the Israeli cabinet approved plans to take over Gaza City in a major escalation of the war. This dramatic decision comes after Hamas has rejected every proposal put on the table by U.S., Qatari, and Egyptian mediators for the release of the hostages, leaving Israel with no viable alternatives. Despite this, the decision to take over Gaza City is being met with fierce backlash both at home and abroad. International leaders, especially European leaders, are condemning the move, and even at home, thousands are protesting, calling for a nationwide shutdown on Sunday for the hostages out of fear that a military operation will further endanger their lives. On the other hand, we're also hearing voices criticizing the move as a half measure, arguing that Israel should fully occupy Gaza. Voices from within Netanyahu's own coalition. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has yet to publicly explain the cabinet decision to the Israeli public and to the world. And so this press conference likely will aim to do just that. But we'll hear what he has to say in just a few moments. In the meantime, I want to bring on ILTV correspondent Shosh Bedrosian. Shosh, you've been following all the latest developments with the hostage negotiations and with the hostage families. What can you tell us on that front and their opposition to this Gaza takeover?
Yeah, sure. So one of the critical points here that I definitely want to speak about is the divide this new plan to take over Gaza City actually has here in the state of Israel. We have been hearing from the right side of this country that they're actually disappointed that the security cabinet didn't end up voting for the entire takeover of the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Lidar, there's another side of Israel who is extremely concerned that going into Gaza City will harm the hostages who might be held there. These families protested last night. There were about 60,000 people that actually hit the streets here in Tel Aviv. They were at Hostages Square. They were outside the Kiryat, the IDF headquarters here in the central part of the city yesterday, demanding for them, for the Israeli government to reach a hostage deal, something we have heard for nearly 2 years now. But they're hoping that there is just one more attempt to get a deal so that there's no more hostages whose lives are lost in any potential military operation. Some of the families actually last night were calling on reservists to not fight if they were called up in this mobilization of Gaza City. We know about 250,000 reservists might be called up just for this one operation of going into Gaza City alone. So, of course, this new expansion of the war comes with a lot of baggage for Israeli society. Lidar, this is going on for 2 years now. We're also marking almost 1 year since 6 hostages were executed in captivity, likely because there was some type of IDF operation nearby. One of those people was Hirsch Goldberg Poland, an American citizen who was murdered in captivity. His name has, been heard by so many people around the world. His mother, his father have been fierce advocates for the hostages. But this is one example the families of hostages are using. This could happen again if the IDF is not cautious. Lidar.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we know that there is serious concern for the hostages with this new plan, as you just mentioned. Now, the press conference the prime minister is about to call, I mean, this is the first time he's going to be speaking directly to the world, to the Israeli public, trying essentially to pitch this cabinet decision to the world and to the families of the hostages. I mean, how do you think it's going to be received?
Sure. I think this is a very interesting thing that is happening within the next 10 or so minutes this press conference could start. One reason is because the first press conference that will take place will be in English for foreign press. The second one will be in Hebrew for Israeli press. I want to say that as a journalist, it's important to listen to both of those things, both of those different press conferences, so we can, be sure to hear if there's any type of different information that might be asked in each different press conference. But he's doing it for a reason, right? English is the language that any international journalist or reporter will be using. It's also a language that anyone around the world can then understand the message. So it's obviously there's a specific reason as to why this is happening, because we've known Netanyahu's held press conferences in the past only in Hebrew, but now he's doing two different versions of this, Lidar. Definitely something for us to keep an eye on, make sure that we are watching both of them. It's also a bit unclear as to kind of what he's going to, what his accomplishments are in this press conference, and also what his objectives are. Like you said, there's also been a lot of condemnation from countries around the world based off of these new military plans that have been approved. What is he trying to say in terms of that, in terms of the countries that have spoken out that they are concerned about this military operation that could happen? We know Israel has seen a lot of its allies question just recently with all of these reports that have come out about starvation and hunger inside of the Gaza enclave. We know that Israel has significantly boosted the amount of humanitarian aid that has gone into the Gaza Strip from the air, from the land. We also know they're also allowing a lot of aid to come in through the Egyptian border at this point in time as well. Jar?
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of criticism, international criticism, as you said, first of all, on the humanitarian crisis that's happening in Gaza per the UN, although, of course, Israel has pushed back on that narrative, saying that they've let in thousands of trucks of aid into Gaza. Just this week alone, they've let in over 1,000 trucks so far. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now calling this press conference likely to address all of these issues and to address the necessity and the importance of the cabinet decision to take over Gaza. Now, I want to remind our viewers that initially the prime minister, who held an interview on Fox News, made the statement that Israel would likely occupy all of Gaza temporarily. He said it's not something that Israel wants to take control of Gaza permanently, and he hopes that this would be just a temporary measure. And then, of course, we go back to the cabinet decision not to occupy all of Gaza, but just to take over Gaza City. So it's a very, I guess, sort of, some people are calling it a half measure, and not the full occupation of Gaza as many predicted would happen. And so now it's going to be very interesting to see how the prime minister explains this and sells this essentially to the world and to the Israeli public, which he's receiving major criticism from both international leaders and from, as you mentioned, the hostage families here in Israel. Now, until we hear from the prime minister, who's set to begin the conference at any moment, I do want to go back, Shosh, now to sort of the United States' role in all of this. We know that Steve Witkoff met this weekend, as you said, with the Qatari prime minister to try and push forward another hostage deal. This after Hamas rejected the last deal that was on the table. What can you tell us on that end?
Sure. So this is something that came out yesterday, that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with the Qatari Prime Minister in Ibiza, Spain. Of course, very significant, right? This comes just a few days after Israel approved these plans to expand the war inside of Gaza City. But it's also in tune and in line with what Witkoff had said just weeks prior. He told the families of hostages in Tel Aviv when he came here for his visit about 2 weeks ago that the Trump administration is looking to secure a comprehensive deal that will not only end the war at once, but also get all of the 50 hostages out of captivity all at the same time. No more piecemeal deals, they said, but a deal that would be all or nothing, essentially. And so now this is basically the plan that we're hearing. He spoke with the Prime Minister of Qatar about that would be something that they're in the war. It's a plan that could come up, but if it is successfully, Jar, which would be very interesting, this could, of course, delay the military objective
Okay,
Here's
Shoshan, we're
Netanyahu
going to
speaking
stop you right
now.
there because we see we're going now live to the press conference.
Tell the truth. The truth is that Hamas still has thousands of armed terrorists in Gaza. It vows to repeat the savagery of the October 7th massacre and to do so again and again and again. It openly professes its goal to destroy the state of Israel. It subjugates Gazans. It steals their foods. It shoots them when they try to move to safe zones. And I think it's instructive that now many Gazans are fighting back. They're begging us, they're begging the world, free us, and free Gaza from Hamas. No nation can accept a genocidal terrorist organization, an organization committed to its annihilation, a stone's throw from its citizens. Our goal is not to occupy Gaza. Our goal is to free Gaza, free it from Hamas terrorists. The war can end tomorrow if Gaza, or rather if Hamas lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages. Gaza will be demilitarized. Israel will have overriding security responsibility. A security zone will be established on Gaza's border with Israel to prevent future terrorist incursions. A civilian administration will be established in Gaza that will seek to live in peace with Israel. That's our plan for the day after Hamas, and let me summarize it. 5 principles for concluding the war. 1, Hamas disarmed. 2nd, all hostages freed. 3rd, Gaza demilitarized. 4th, Israel has overriding security control. And 5, non-Israeli peaceful civilian administration. By that I mean a civilian administration that doesn't educate its children for terror, doesn't pay terrorists, and doesn't launch terrorist attacks against Israel. That's what we want to see in Gaza. So it's neither Hamas nor the PA. That's our plan. Given Hamas's refusal to lay down its arms, Israel has no choice but to finish the job and complete the defeat of Hamas. Now, we've done a great deal. We have about 70 to 75% of Gaza under Israeli control, military control. But we have 2 remaining strongholds, okay? These are Gaza City and the central camps in the Muasi. That's roughly, it's schematically presented here, but it's fairly accurate. Last Thursday, Israel's Security Cabinet, instructed the IDF to dismantle the 2 remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza City and the central camps. Contrary to false claims, this is the best way to end the war and the best way to end it speedily. We will do so by first enabling the civilian population to safely leave the combat areas to designated safe zones. In these safe zones, they'll be given ample food, water, and medical care, as we've done before. And again, contrary to false claims, our policy throughout the war has been to prevent a humanitarian crisis, while Hamas's policy has been to create it. Since the beginning of the war, Israel has let in close to 2 million tons of aid. I know of no other army that has enabled such aid to go to the civilian population in enemy territory. Now, if we had a starvation policy, no one in Gaza would have survived after 2 years of war. But our policy has been the exact opposite. We let in, as I said, almost 2 million tons of aid and sent millions of text messages, millions of phone calls to Gazans to get out of harm's way. Yet in the last few months, Hamas has violently looted the aid trucks meant to get to Palestinian civilians. They deliberately created a shortage of supply. And the UN consistently refused, until recently, to distribute the thousands of trucks that we led into Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing. So our problems, we've had tons of uncollected food rotting on the Gazan side of the border because the UN was and still is unwilling to deliver all of it. Here are the tons and tons and tons of humanitarian aid that Israel led in to the Gazan side of the Kerem Shalom crossing. It's just sitting there because it's not distributed. So now we're going to go around this obstacle. We are going around it by doing 3 things. 1, can I show this, please? Okay. Designating safe corridors for humanitarian aid distribution. No, that's showing the problem, not showing the solution, but here it is. First, designating rather safe corridors for aid distribution. You can go, you can drive trucks there, and you'll be safe. Second, increasing the number of safe distribution points managed by the Gazan humanitarian foundations. And three, airdrops. That's airdrops done by the Israeli Air Force, and we're inviting others to join us. The result has been a humanitarian surge, which we're coordinating with President Trump and his team, and hundreds of trucks have gone in recent days. This is preventing hunger, but it's not prevented the global campaign of lies that we have all witnessed. So in Gaza, despite Hamas's obstacles, 2 million people are now getting access to humanitarian aid. But I'll tell you who isn't. The only ones that are being deliberately starved in Gaza are our hostages. This is Evyatar David. Look at his hand, at his arm. He's being deliberately starved by these Hamas monsters. And look at the Hamas captor. Look at the difference. He's eating, and he's eating well. The purpose of this news conference is to puncture the lies and spread the truth, but that distortion has been propelled around the earth, almost the way that the Jewish people were maligned in the Middle Ages. Every massacre of the Jewish people was preceded by massive vilification. We were said to be spreading vermin to Christian societies. We were said to be poisoning the wells. We were said to slaughter Christian children for their blood. And as these lies spread around the globe, they were followed by horrific massacres, pogroms, displacements, finally culminating in the worst massacre of them all, the Holocaust. Today, the Jewish state is being maligned in a similar way. Everything that I told you could be verified easily, but it hasn't. And the international press has bought hook, line, and sinker Hamas statistics, Hamas claims, Hamas forgeries, and Hamas photographs. For example, these three children. The first one is Osama al-Raqub. He is in Italy getting treatment because Israel got him out. That's what he looks like today. He has a genetic disease that damages the lungs and digestive system. It makes it hard to absorb nutrients and gain weight, okay? So Israel facilitated Osama's travel to Italy, where he got the medical aid that transformed his position. The second one is Abdul Qadir al-Fayumi. He suffers from a genetic neurological disorder, spinal muscular atrophy, a degenerative condition that causes muscle wasting, weakness, and severe weight loss unrelated to nutrition. This was the real cause of his frail appearance, not starvation. In fact, he was treated in Israel in 2018. Doesn't help because it's a congenital disease and it defies most treatment at least. The third one is the most celebrated one. This is a New York Times cover photo. It's on the front page of Muhammad Zakaria Ayub and his mother. Muhammad Zakaria Ayub is suffering from a genetic illness which you're familiar with. It's called cerebral palsy. His mother is well fed and his brother is healthy. I'm looking right now into the possibility of a governmental suit against the New York Times because this is outrageous. Of course, the correction was postage size. I don't know where it was buried. But this is outrageous. These are the three most celebrated photos, and they're all fake. It's the kind of malignant lies that were leveled at the Jewish people in the Middle Ages. We won't suffer. We won't allow it to go unchallenged, and this is the purpose of this press conference. I hope that you open your eyes to a simple fact. Hamas lies. Now you can ask me any question you want.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Could you give us, please, a timeline when you expect to conclude the new expansion of the new offensive? And if you can give us a few more details about how you're going to provide about this humanitarian surge and how GHF is going to be involved in this. Thank you.
Well, the timeline that we set for the action is fairly quickly. I mean, we want to, first of all, enable safe zones to be established, facilities to be brought to, so the civilian population in Gaza City can move out, as they moved out in Rafah, by the way. You remember in Rafah? There were 1.4 million people. People said they can't, they have nowhere to go and they're not going to move out. It took us, I think, about 8 days or 6 days to move them, and they all moved. There were practically no civilian casualties because they all left. And they went to the Moasi area that I showed you before on the map. We think we can achieve a similar result that safeguards the civilian population, at the same time enables us to go at the last stronghold, the most important stronghold of Hamas, which we haven't done so up to the war. I mean, we've been there, but we haven't taken it as a goal to dismantle the Hamas stronghold there. We do now. I don't want to talk about exact timetables, but we're talking in terms of a fairly short timetable, because we want to bring the war to an end. This is how we bring the war to an end. As far as the surge is concerned, we're talking to the U.S. about additional measures, but we have, because what we're doing, as I said, is designate safe corridors, allow and expand the GHF distribution points, and we're trying to bring in more resources, hope to recruit some international organizations, maybe, God willing, the UN, if they ever decide to actually do something for the Palestinian people that doesn't go through Hamas. And third, increase the airdrops. The airdrops are important, but they're not the most important thing. The most important thing is ground routes that bring aid, a surge of aid to the Palestinian population, as far as we can, without letting Hamas loot it.
Second question,
Prime Minister, two questions. Firstly, why is Israel not allowing foreign journalists into Gaza to report independently? And secondly, President Trump has said there is real starvation in Gaza. Do you disagree?
Yeah, on the first question, in fact, we have decided, and I've ordered, directed the military to bring in foreign journalists, more foreign journalists, a lot. There's a problem of assuring security, but I think it can be done in a way that is responsible and careful to preserve your own safety. So the directive has been since, when is it? 2 days ago. From what you're telling me, it hasn't yet been implemented, but it should be, because I think you should see it. And one of the things you're going to see is precisely our efforts to bring in Gazans, to bring in rather food to Gaza. You'll see the trucks that have been entered Gaza and are still waiting to be distributed. You'll see Gazans who are fighting Hamas. We haven't seen it since the beginning of the war. And that's a reflection of the fact that they know that we're approaching the end stage. And these people are, risking their lives and their families, but they say, we can't take it anymore, and they fight back. And the other thing you'll see is physical destruction. And the physical destruction is not because Israel is destroying structures with people in there. That's not what's happening. Israel, in fact, is clearing the population, as in Rafah. But the Hamas terrorists who may stay in those areas booby-trap just about every single building. Not every single building, but a lot of them. And every road, and every street, and every junction, every intersection. So one of the things that we do is we place basically old APC, armored personnel carriers, with tons of explosives, and we detonate them, and they set off all the booby traps. That's why you see the destruction. And we do similar things in the tunnels. The tunnels, these terror tunnels, we put TNT in them, and we detonate that after people have left. But they're under buildings, so the buildings collapse. That's why you see destruction. You see destruction not because we go after civilian populated areas, but in fact areas that have been cleared of civilians and are still rife with terrorists. And that's how we've been able to reduce actually the civilian casualties and increase, of course, the terrorist casualties.
So the press conference has concluded. Netanyahu now taking some questions from the foreign media. I just want to recap some of the highlights from the press conference. Netanyahu saying that Israel's goal is not to occupy Gaza, but rather to free Gaza from the Hamas terrorists. He lays out a 5-point plan in order to achieve the goals of the war, which is to eliminate Hamas and return all of the 50 remaining hostages in Hamas captivity. He's saying 75% of Gaza is already under Israeli control, and the cabinet has approved plans to take over the last remaining strongholds of Hamas in Gaza City and also in the central camps, perhaps in a second stage of the offensive. And Netanyahu saying that this is the best way to end the war and to do so speedily. He also says that Israel will continue offering aid to the civilian population in Gaza, saying that no army in history has offered aid to its enemy civilian population during wartime. And he goes on to debunk many of the sort of humanitarian aid, starvation narrative that's been going around. He says that Israel is going to continue opening safe corridors for the for humanitarian aid, is going to provide airdrops, and is going to work with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to increase the aid going in to the Gazan civilian population. This is the first time we're seeing the Prime Minister really finally responding to what he called the global campaign of lies against Israel, saying that the narrative pushed by the United Nations and pushed by legacy media, he specifically singles out the New York Times for their false narrative on Gaza starvation, saying that he is considering filing a lawsuit against the New York Times for its coverage on this issue. And so the Prime Minister laying out his plan for the takeover of Gaza City and finally responding to the global campaign of lies. And with that, I want to now bring in Ruthie Blum, senior editor at the Jewish News Syndicate, or JNS. Ruthie, thank you for joining us. So what do you make of the press conference? What are your first impressions?
Oh, well, I think it's important that he said what he said, but it's nothing new. Unfortunately, he has to reiterate what has been obvious to anybody paying attention, but I guess he has no choice. Now, it's also interesting, as you pointed out before, that his press conference in Hebrew later this evening in his Israel time will probably focus, I assume, on the hostages, because the hysteria within Israel about ending the war focuses on the risk to the hostages that this new operation poses. And what I'd like to say about that is that anybody saying this, the foreign journalists and the Israeli journalists, saying that we've got to end the war in order to get the hostages out because for 2 years we haven't done anything, is ridiculous. For 2 years, in the last 2 years, we have gotten out 200 hostages, actually, and endangered everybody else, including the state of Israel, in the process. And nothing we do at this moment can guarantee no risk to the hostages.
So what do you make of the cabinet decision to take over Gaza City? I mean, is it enough to achieve the war goals? Because it certainly does fall short of a full occupation of Gaza.
Well, it does, but I understood from leaks, of course, from the Security Cabinet meeting. There was a 10-hour meeting, and after that, there were leaks all over the place with direct quotes. We don't know if they're accurate or not, but that there had to be a compromise because, according to these leaks, the chief of staff of the IDF, Eyal Zamir, had a different idea. He wanted to encircle parts of Gaza and not to take over them. And the prime minister wanted to take over all of Gaza, or at least his right-hand flank wanted to. And so the compromise reached was that we would take over Gaza City and the central camps and Moasi precisely because there are hostages there, or we believe there are. And a main order of business is taking away the leverage that Hamas has. Because in every other respect, Israel has won the war, or at least has decimated Hamas, and would have won the war a long time ago and ended it with victory had we not been trying desperately to avoid killing hostages.
But so why the delay until October? You know, I've been speaking with analysts, security analysts, all day over this, and many say that it seems to be sort of a half measure or just a measure to try and pressure Hamas into a deal that Israel doesn't actually want to go in to Gaza City. I mean, what do you make of this?
Look, that's what everybody's saying. Everybody's saying, okay, because the Trump administration, on the one hand, the Trump administration is saying, come on, let's get this over with, all or nothing, let's get it over with, win the war, right? On the other hand, Steve Witkoff went to Ibiza, Spain, to meet with the premier of Qatar in order to try again to broker some new deal. And that the last deal wasted a lot of time and enabled Hamas to booby trap more tunnels and to starve the hostages even further, etc. So it's really unclear why October, but one possibility is because the army said, look, we have to now recruit more reservists and regular soldiers that are entering the army now or just finishing basic training. We need time to evacuate the civilian population in Gaza to the safe zones and to build encampments there where they can get medical treatment and food, etc. And that takes time. Now we're in August, so we're talking about a few weeks from now, and that's very bad. That is why certain people in the cabinet are opposed to this. They say we have to do it all. We have to occupy all of Gaza and get this done right away, etc. So that was the argument going on. And I think as Prime Minister Netanyahu always does, he tries to find the golden middle ground.
Absolutely. And, you know, Netanyahu making his case to the world about the expected Israeli takeover of Gaza City, but also finally pushing back against the narratives that we've seen from legacy media, from the UN. It's about time that someone said something on the Israeli side, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But you know something? I know there's all this complaint about how Israel doesn't have good public diplomacy or what we call hasbara, and that Netanyahu doesn't speak out enough, though when he gives lots of interviews in English, Israelis complain that all he does is give interviews outside of Israel. Meanwhile, we opinion writers, I'm among them, myself included, but many, many others, not only in Israel, many other pro-Israel writers have been making this argument all along, that the only purposeful starvation going on in Gaza is Hamas doing it. Hamas wants to starve its own people and wants to starve the hostages, of course, as we saw the horrific pictures of the hostages being purposely starved recently that came out. Hamas likes to put out those videos to torture everybody while torturing the hostages. It's not true that nobody is pushing back against this. The trouble is that we have a left-wing media here and also former generals, former prime ministers who have moved to the far left, who not only aren't backing Israel up in this, but in their hatred, because of their hatred for Netanyahu, they are actually buying the narrative of Israel's worst enemies, claiming that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, etc. So it's a little bit hard to push back when you have Israelis leading that claim. It's a lie, of course, but it's very hard. The enemies love hearing that. And Hamas watches, Hamas is watching both of these press conferences. Hamas knows English and Hebrew.
Indeed. Ruthie Blum, thank you so much for your analysis and for joining us today. And Shosh Bedrosian, thank you for joining us with an update on the hostages and the hostages' families. And we will, of course, continue to follow the Prime Minister's press conference in Hebrew at 8 p.m. tonight. And right now, I just want to go back to the press conference. It's still going on with reporters' questions. So let's go back and take a look at what the Prime Minister has to say.
On the social media are bots. They can categorically say they're bots, and they're bots that especially in America. They want to attack the support that Israel has from the Republican side. So they describe how, themselves as homespun Southerners, except they're riding from Asia somewhere. That's a big issue. We have to contend with it, and we also have to stand up and tell the truth. Probably at greater frequency than we're doing now. That's exactly what I'm trying to do now. But again, if you want to win this war, end it speedily. End it speedily. Expose the lies as much as you can. End it speedily, and that's how you win the war. You win the war, the propaganda war, by winning the war and winning the peace. That's the simplest way to do it, and it's about time to do that.
Sky News UK.
Next question, please.
Last question.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Given what the IPC says is the unfolding spectre of famine in the Gaza Strip, would you accept that your 11-week blockade, complete blockade on Gaza, played a role in that? And also, given the killings that we have seen at the GHF aid sites, how will you guarantee that that kind of disaster will not happen when you have 1 million more people displaced? Thank you.
Well, number one, the problem that we had was trying to stop Hamas looting. There's no question there was Hamas looting. Everybody saw it. You could see it. Hamas terrorists taking over trucks and so on. We tried to do two things simultaneously. Stop the trucks and bring in the trucks through the GHF distribution points. Okay. It wasn't successful. And it wasn't successful, among other things, because Hamas interdicted also the GHF program, the distribution point. So Hamas created this problem, and it was directed against us. Immediately, we have a starvation policy, which is completely false, any more than we have a genocide policy, which is equally false. We don't. Not this, not that. I don't know of a country that texts millions of messages to civilians to get out of harm's way, giving up the element of surprise, or calling them individually on cell phones. Yet Israel is accused of genocide. It's absurd. Or starvation policy. But there was a problem of deprivation. No question about it. And so we had to solve it. And the way we solve it is the way I described it to you. And there are now not 0 trucks, but at least in, I think last time I checked, hundreds of trucks that went into Gaza. That's alleviating the situation. Now we want to increase the number of distribution sites. So there's not, basically you answer this problem, or you solve this problem by the law of supply and demand. If you have a lot of supply, if you flood Gaza with food, which some of it will be pilfered, there's no way to get around that, will be looted by Hamas, but you'll have, if enough food reaches the marketplace, so to speak, then you'll see a difference. And you know what the difference is? How do we know for sure there's a difference? Because we monitor, as any one of you could, the price of food in Gaza. It's plummeted. It's plummeted ever since that we decided to take to do the humanitarian surge. And it'll plummet more if other countries join us. So I called on other countries to join in the airdrops. I actually called them to help persuade the UN to move those trucks. Because every truck that goes in brings down the price of food. That's what happens. And when you have no shortage like that, then you don't have also the crowding around distribution points. And by the way, a lot of the firing was done by Hamas, seeking to have response by our forces, and very often they didn't. They held back. They stayed their fire, even though their own lives were on the line. Yeah.
We're done. Thank you, Prime Minister.
We're done?
We're done. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't resist that one.
Thank you. Matthew Doran from ABC Australia.
Oh, okay.
Matthew Doran from ABC Australia. You've
Yeah.
seen countries such as the UK, Canada, France say that they will support Palestinian statehood in the next short while. You've described that as a reward for Hamas here. Other countries like Australia are also walking down this path, not quite there yet. How much of this is a reward for Hamas, and how much of it is actually countries like those who have repeatedly said Israel does have a right to defend itself, but are now struggling to stomach what they're seeing you and your military doing in Gaza?
Well, first of all, those who say that Israel has a right to defend itself are also saying, but don't exercise that right. When we do what any country would do faced with this genocidal terrorist organization that has performed the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, I think we're actually applying force judiciously, and they know it. They know what they would do if right next to Melbourne or right next to Sydney you had this horrific attacks. I think you would do it, at least what we're doing, probably maybe not as efficiently and as precisely as we're doing it. We've lost quite a few soldiers in that effort. But that's the first thing. I think that the second thing you ask is Palestinian state. Well, the assumption, the prevailing assumption in this is that the problem that we have with the Palestinians is the absence of a Palestinian state. And if they were given a Palestinian state, they would stop the efforts to destroy the Jewish state. But the Palestinians were offered a state many times, including in the partition resolution, and they turned it down. They were offered statehood by my predecessors with lavish concessions. They turned it down. Because the Palestinians are not about creating a state, they're about destroying a state. That's why they opposed the Jewish national movement to create a state. It's called Zionism. They opposed it before the inception of the Jewish state, and they've opposed it since. They've opposed it when they had the Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and Gaza in their hold. They didn't say, let's create a state there. They didn't say that. Because again, their goal is the destruction of a state. It defies imagination or understanding how intelligent people around the world, okay, including seasoned diplomats, government leaders, and respected journalists, fall for this absurdity. It's so easy to verify, you know. And look at the PA, okay? Look at the Palestinian National Movement today is divided, okay? Divided between two forces, okay? The Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria and Hamas in Gaza, okay? Hamas in Gaza had a de facto state. It had a state. And it used it to launch a war of terror against Israel because their doctrine is that the destruction of Israel should proceed with forceful and direct military and terrorist moves. That's what they did on October 7th. And that's what they'll do again if we don't destroy them. The Palestinian Authority, on the other hand, says no. First, Israel has to be reduced to indefensible boundaries. You've got to get them out with the ICC, with the UN, with the Security Council resolutions, drive them to indefensible boundaries, and then deliver the blow, because Israel is too strong in its present configuration. These discussions are open, they're held. Anybody, you don't need Israeli intel for it, believe it, okay? You can just scour the web, you'll find it, okay? So they have no difference about the goal. That's why the Palestinian children in Judea and Samaria and the Palestinian children, that is the Palestinian children under the PA and the Palestinian children under Hamas, are educated with exactly the same textbooks. That's why the PA calls its public squares against mass killers of Jews. That's why they have pay for slay. The more Jews you murder, the more you get paid, or your family gets paid. I mean, so that's the crux of the problem. The real reason that this conflict persists is not because of the absence of a Palestinian state, but the persistent Palestinian refusal to recognize a Jewish state in any boundary, okay? Now, when you give them a Palestinian state, when they haven't abandoned the goal of destroying the Jewish state, all you're doing is you're bringing the next war closer. Again, Hamas had a state. You just brought the war closer. And if you did the same thing in Judea and Samaria, right above Tel Aviv, enveloping Jerusalem, some say cutting Jerusalem into two, that's all that's going to happen. You're going to have the radicals again take it over, Iran take it over, and start a state from improved boundaries, start a war with improved boundaries. That's not going to happen. I think the solution to this problem is that the Palestinians should have all the powers to govern themselves in the places where they live and none of the powers to threaten Israel. They should obviously reform their whole education system. They should reform their whole historical outlook and say, all right, we accept that Israel is here to stay, not as a fact, as a physical or geographic fact, but as a fact of historical equity. If they want to live here next to us, they have to stop seeking our destruction. And to give them an independent state with all the trimmings, okay, is to invite a future war and a certain war. And that's something that today the Israeli public forcefully opposes. Before the war, by the way, it was about third, two-thirds in the overall population, probably 60-40, or even more, against in the Jewish population. But now it's changed more dramatically. I mean, we had a vote in the Knesset a few months ago about the possibility of, having a Palestinian state, and the result was 99-9. 99-9. And that covers a very broad spectrum. And today, most of the Jewish public is against the Palestinian state for the simple reason that they know it won't bring peace, it'll bring war. To have European countries and Australia march into that rabbit hole, just like that, fall right into it, and buy this canard is disappointing, and I think it's actually shameful. But it's not going to change our position. Again, we will not commit national suicide to get a good op-ed for 2 minutes. We won't do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that concludes the press conference by Prime Minister Netanyahu. I want to bring back Ruthie Blum joining us. So Ruthie, the Prime Minister fielding questions from international reporters. Some questions, that may seem obvious perhaps to most Israelis. Questions about his thoughts on why the recognition of a Palestinian state by countries like France and Canada is essentially a reward to Hamas. It seems like Israel is just missing out on the narrative, on world opinion. It's losing the battle for world opinion. Doesn't matter how many times we repeat the same messages over and over. I mean, why is that? What's your take on this? Israel simply isn't able to get its messaging across.
Listen, if you think it's a problem of messaging, well, then what you could say is, yes, we just need to hire better PR people. Over the years, we've heard this again and again. Israel needs to rebrand itself. Israel needs to say. Now, the fact is that if somebody is against Israel just in his gut, or because of his constituents, a radical Islamist constituents in Europe, nothing we say can make a difference. As Netanyahu pointed out, none of this, you don't need to be in the Mossad or the CIA to know what the Palestinian Authority and what Hamas, all of these groups of Palestinians, what they say. It's in their newspapers, it's on their radio stations, television, children's programs, crossword puzzles, it's all out there. And today with AI, you don't even need to know Arabic to translate it. So anyone who ignores that is doing that on purpose. Obviously, anti-Semitism is one cause of that. We know that because of the explosion of Jew hatred that happened around the world on October 8th, 2023, the day after Hamas committed its atrocities, before Israel even went in, performed a ground incursion. So I'm sorry, the Jew hatred came out of the woodworks, and we saw that actually this is not something rational going on here. And everything he said is right. I don't know how many journalists in that room he persuaded, but it doesn't matter. I think he needs to remind the people who know that in their heart and their souls, to remind them that they're on the right side and not to be bullied by the likes of the New York Times into believing the lies.
Exactly, as he said, Israel won't self-sacrifice just for a positive op-ed in the newspaper. Ruthie Blum, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for your analysis of the Prime Minister's impromptu press conference. And I want to remind our viewers, there's another press conference that the Prime Minister has scheduled for 8 p.m. In Hebrew for the Israeli press and the Israeli public. Ruthie Blum, thank you so much for your analysis and for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And so summing up once again, the Prime Minister's press conference, 4:30, began at 4:30 and it's ended now, about a 40-minute press conference fielding questions from the international media here in Israel. He's laid out the case, or done his best to lay out the case for Israel's approved plans to take over Gaza City, saying our goal is not to occupy Gaza, but rather to free Gaza from the Hamas terrorists. He lays out a 5-point plan, says this is the best way to end the war once and for all, and to do so speedily. Also saying that Israel is going to continue to provide humanitarian aid for Gaza civilians, saying that he doesn't know of any army in history that has done so. The Prime Minister also going on the attack, debunking the starvation narrative that he says is being pushed by the United Nations, being pushed by legacy media. He says that Israel is going to continue providing humanitarian aid, opening more safe corridors for the delivery of humanitarian aid, increasing airdrops, and working with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to ensure that aid is delivered to the civilians in Gaza and not to Hamas. Also saying that the only people being starved in Gaza are the hostages. And he's finally responding to what he called a global campaign of lies against Israel, and even said that the government of Israel is considering suing the New York Times for its biased and flat out, he said, deceitful and fake coverage of what is happening in Gaza. So the Prime Minister laying out his vision of the future of Gaza, the future of the war to the world. And at 8 p.m., he's going to do the same for the Israeli public. And so that's it for this edition of ILTV on the hour. We'll, of course, continue to follow tonight as the Prime Minister gives his second press conference, and we'll continue giving you the most important updates coming from Israel and the Middle East. But for now, you can keep up with us on our ILTV app. I'm Lidar Gravelazi. This is ILTV News, and thanks for watching.